Hey, this is James Burton over at AR Build Junkie. Recently, we sat down with Frank Woods over at TASKER Network to discuss an article that's gotten a lot of traction that he did on the Sig XM5 and 6.8 by 51. And it's a really comprehensive take on the Army's recent adoption of the rifle and round, which was designed to replace the M4 and 5.56. So what you'll hear here is a conversation about the article, how it came about, and some of the main findings in it. With that said, we will go to the recording, and here is Frank Woods talking about the Sig XM5 and 6.8 for Dummies. Frank, thanks for your time. And, as I started to look into 6.8 and perhaps doing an article on it, we see what you've done with your article over at Tasker Network. It's very detailed, very involved, and obviously took a lot of time. So, congratulations on that. It's an amazing piece of work. But I think before we start, give our audience the basics of what Tasker Network is, and then go ahead and just dive into a little bit about the article, how it came about, and what you think people should know. And I will stay out of the way and just let you talk, because I think that's what people want to know. They want to hear your opinion on the rifle. I know you've got a lot of good sources out there, and you tapped into a lot of that to put this article together. So, again, let's start with the Tasker Network and go from there.
So, Tasker Network it's a broadcast point for all the information that is organically culminated from light fighter and tactics and applications. And the reason we came up with the Tasker Network was because, light fighter and tactics and applications work as well as they do as discussion hubs because there's not a open door, come one, come all approach to letting people in. We vet, access is vetted. Some call it gatekeeping. I'm totally okay with that. So because if if you look at certain Facebook groups in the 2A community, once they get to a point of being in multiple thousands of members, like tactics and applications is like just a pinch under 2,000 people. You have some groups that are 3, 4, 10 or more thousand people, and this as you start getting into multiple thousands of people, the signal to noise ratio goes to complete shit, and it's just hard for the staff to really, as far as I've seen, it's almost an impossible task for the people running those big groups to really control the tone and the temper of the discourse the way you see it happen in tactics and applications, for example. So we said, well, where tactics and applications and light fighter are, they work as well as they do because of that system, but we also don't want to deprive the rest of the 2A community from at least having the opportunity to learn what we're talking about and why that, we want to be able to share that information that's so good without running the risk of diluting the environment where the discussions take place. So Tasker Network is a broadcast point where we, organically harvest the content of discussion that happens within light fighter and tactics and applications and repackage it into articles, and there are other forms of content that are on the board that we plan to do and put it out there for anyone to see. And it's really kind of also like a hidden welcome signal to those, like one of the catchphrases or slogans for Tasker is for those who would. Guns isn't just like a hobby to them. It's not just a bunch of toys and stuff that they play with on the range and plinking, or some people are competitors only and they don't really look into the defensive aspects. And if you really think about it, the spirit and the intent of the Second Amendment isn't for you to have fun at the range with your firearms. It's to be able to mount a defensive capability should it be required. And that's the kind of people we want to bring in to light fighter and tactics and applications. So while Tasker also functions to get the word out of here's what we're talking about and here's how well informed that conversation is and here's food for thought for you, it's also saying if you want in on this crowd, if you're the type that this appeals to, we want you. We're not singling any demographic out and saying, no, we don't want you. Because I already could tell you, like, I've already accepted, we can't save everybody. We're not going to change everybody's mind with regard to how they do things or how they approach things when it comes to firearms tactics training, all that stuff. It's impossible. It's just we're not going to get everybody. So at the very least, the ones we can get, they know where to find us. The light fighter you could just walk up and apply to, and if you fill out your profile the right way and you post an introduction, you're fine. Tactics and applications is a little bit more vetted, and like you have to kind of know somebody that's in there who could vouch for you and say you're not some fucking shithead, and that will get you in there. And that's always been a quality over quantity operation. So that's where Tasker Network comes from, and that's that's its function in the overall apparatus, is to be able to deliver to the greater community the quality of content and discussion that we possess within those communication groups and stuff like that. So where this article came from with the XM5 was, I got to say, first and foremost, I'm not a military guy. I have no direct eyes on the XM5 or the XM250 program or like anything NGSW related. I know people that know about that stuff, and those are the people I spoke to and asked questions, and they asked to be, quoted anonymously or not named at all, and that's fine. So that article was an effort to get ahead of what tends to happen on the internet, where, especially in the firearms industry community, like that part of the 2A community that closely keeps tabs on the goings-ons of the industry. Some guys have some inside knowledge. Some guys just see the headlines and they know enough to sound like they know what they're talking about, but you could tell in their parlance that there's a couple of pieces of the puzzle that they're missing. That it's like a physics equation. Like if you just change the number or a symbol in like one or two spaces, the whole output of the equation changes entirely. So what I was seeing when that news broke, you had a lot of conjecture and speculation that was happening, and a lot of people were basing that conjecture and speculation off of what they thought they knew, either because it was what they thought they saw someone else say, or based on their limited understanding of the subject matter via whatever vehicle it was that brought them into this section of the 2A community to begin with. Sometimes it's video games and stuff like that. As close as they could mentally relate to the subject was their lens through which they looked at the topic. And what I was seeing was a lot of people only focusing on, because there's good that comes with the NGSW selections, if you will, like the SIG weapons that were picked. So you get the MCX Spear, you get their belt fed, the what will later be known as the M5 and the M250. They're only focusing on the negative, and they're not. They might not have any insight at all into why that program happened, what problems that the Army was trying to solve, and the true fruits of the results that came of that program. So you had a lot of guys like Ash Hess summed it up in a way that was like, everybody looking at the M5 is reacting. They're getting defensive over the M4 the way older fuddy kind of guys would get defensive of the M14 when the M16 came around back in the NOM era and stuff like that, where they were, circling the wagons around, old reliable, and completely eschewing the newcomer, regardless of what benefits it brought to the table. So the purpose of that article was to get in front of that and blast as far and wide as I could all the facts that I could muster. And I remember when I showed that article to Eric Graves over at Soldier Systems, he said, "This is a great article." He goes, "You did an excellent job. You looked at both sides. You didn't leave anything out. You did nothing. There's nothing here unaccounted for." And that article ended up being like 32 pages long and something to the tune of like 10,300 some odd words. And I remember being exhausted after I got it done because I cranked it out in like 3 days because my whole thing was like it was time sensitive. Like there was speed, like I needed to be speedy about it in order to get this membrane or filter into the discourse of the subject as early as possible so as many people could see it and have a better idea of what it was they were talking about.
I've talked to some others about the XM5, and they're experts on the AR platform and whatnot, and their take on it was fairly negative. So I wanted to bring you on. Obviously, there are pros and cons with this. Would it be okay to start with some of the positives that you do see with this, and then we can kind of work into some of the perhaps negatives that you see? And are there
Sure.
some things positive that we may not be thinking of? I know in the article you talk a little bit about Overmatch, and that's something I haven't that I don't know too much about.
So I'll tackle the belt fit, the M250 first, because there's really less to say about that compared to the M5. It does use the same ammo as the M5, so um, there was a debate up front about what the real prize of the NGSW program was. And some people thought it was the M5. Some people thought it was the M157 optic that Vortex won the contract for. Some people said it was the belt fed. And the reason that people say that the M250 was the prize is because it's far and wide known among my military vet friends that the M249 just it apparently, I'm not speaking ill of FN or any products that they develop, but apparently the 249 just doesn't work that well that often. And I remember Casey, he's one of the light fighter and tactics and applications guys. He was telling me he had a brand new 249 in the army, and that thing still jammed up and malfunctioned on him and stuff like that. So there's something to say where it's good that the 249s are getting replaced with something that is not only more reliable and or allegedly, I mean, there's still a lot of testing that has to be done to make sure all the kinks are worked out, but the Army liked it enough to select it at this point as their final selection. But I remember Graves was telling me he shot the M250 and it recoiled lighter than an M4 or your typical 5.56 AR, which I don't know how you do that with a bigger bullet that has more oomph behind it than a 5.56 does. But it's good that the automatic rifleman, if you will be getting better working equipment with a farther effective range than what 5.56 currently allows for, which also goes into Overmatch, like you mentioned. The optic itself, the M157, it brings a lot of cool capability to the table. There was a part of that article where I didn't go too much into the optic because the science that and like what it does in terms of like mesh networks and like I know it has like a HUD overlay on the reticle and stuff, and it has like a built-in rangefinder which is removable, I understand, and it tells you how far away your target is, where you have to hold for windage. I mean, elevation and estimated. It doesn't read wind, but it'll give you a wind hold based on whatever the fuck the computer inside of it does. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of like that X4 thing that Magpul showed at SHOT Show in that regard. But it also some kind of meshed network thing that like it's above my head. Like I don't have communications equipment like that, and I don't think like I think it indicates what your buddies on your team might be looking at while you're like that you can't see from behind cover or something like that. I don't know. I just remember that on Light Fighter in the conversation, somebody who I assume worked for Natick because Natick was the one that was working on that whole thing, like the mesh network stuff. He was pretty upset that I quote unquote glossed over the capabilities of the optic because I quoted there's a really long in like section 4 there's like a really long quote about Chuck, and he's talking about the increased weight of the soldier load weighed against the benefit of the added capability that the new technology brings to the table. he was like, I don't know if all this extra weight is worth, or I don't know if all this extra capability is worth all the extra weight that these people are going to be having to carry. And the other thing to be conscious of is this is a really expensive scope. It would be a ridiculous expense to try to outfit every single one of these rifles that goes into service with an M157 optic. And it's not like the M157 optic is limited to just being used on the M5. Well, it might be. I don't know if what the reticle is calibrated for, if anything. The point I'm trying to make is I think there's going to be more M5s with than there are M157s actually in service. I mean, you might even see M5s with, like, because I know the Army picked the Sig Tango 6T 1-6, like the one that they're currently using on the M110E1 SDMR. It's very likely that you'll see more M5s equipped with that optic and more M157s on the M250. So because it has the longer barrel, the extra range, and the extra effective range because of the ammo, like it kind of makes more sense to put that more expensive optic on the more farther reaching weapon. Not that the M5 can't reach as far as the M250. Well, like I said, it shoots the same ammo, but the M250 can reach farther more accurately due to its longer barrel and stuff like that. The other positives that come from this, I mean, the MCX Spear, which became the M5, it's really just the most mature form of what started as like the 308 MCX back in the day. They'd been developing that gun for a really long time, and it's just like when the government came knocking for this NGSW program, SIG was smart to say, you know what, we've already been working on this. Let's do with that. There is a slide in my article where it compares the M5 to the SCAR 17 or the Mark 17 CQC with a 13-inch barrel. They're relatively the same size. So the gun itself is just another large frame battle rifle, if you will. Nothing really all that surprising or groundbreaking or whatever. The magic really happens in the ammo that it shoots, which SIG developed for it. That's one of the big takeaways because what I think, what are they calling it? CC6, like it doesn't have an M number right now, like XM193 or M855 or M855A1. So I think right now they're calling the 6851 cartridge 68CCA, which is common cartridge ammo or some shit like that. I have it in the article itself, but if you want to reference that, but it does the same. So we've had mixed weaponry in the fire team, squad, and platoon, and so on and so forth for a while now. We've had 5.56 and 7.62 weapons for a very long time. The simplest way of looking at 6.851 is it does what 7.62 NATO was meant to do better. It does its job better. Now there are some takeaways to it. The added pressure of the ammo, what is it, like 80K pounds per square inch? Barrel life is going to significantly, like some weapons like that pressure, they just can't. They're not made for that much chamber pressure. But also because you're sending the bullet that fast down the barrel, the barrels tend to wear out quicker. But what it does do is, like I always say, like war is one of the best advancers for technology. Like if we ever needed a reason to enhance or advance our technology, a war is always a great reason to do it. And everything that you see on the commercial market in terms of electronics and stuff like GPS and stuff like that, that can all trace itself back to a wartime requirement that once the military got what it needed and the technology matured and developed, it became available to the commercial market. So that bimetal case that Sig Sauer developed that allows for that increased pressure, that it's going to be very interesting to see that technology in ammo retroactively applied to ammo we already use, like 5.56 and 7.62. Theoretically, I would not be surprised if we saw a new upper receiver for the M4 or M16 platform that, like any AR upper, just slaps into the lower and you push the pins in, it's good to go. But the barrel and chamber are a little beefed up to handle higher pressure rounds. Maybe this becomes known as M4A2 or something like that, where it's firing new 5.56 ammo in a bimetal case that can be loaded with extremely higher pressure, that perhaps it does give the 5.56 ammo not just increased effective range because it's but also armor defeat capability, which was the Overmatch and the armor defeat were the two biggest reasons that the Army was concerned about this. They were looking at near peer threats because they said, look, we've been fighting cave dwellers and rags for the last 20 years, but the nearest the near peer or the nearest equivalent standing armies in the world, like Russia and China, they have body armor comparable to ours, and our main, so if you're comparing like an M4 to an AK-74, you no longer have overmatch, you have parity. They're not parity, like parity, parity, where both guns fire a round that is effective at to the same distance. Like they're both like equally matched, hence there being no overmatch. So the Army looked at it and said, hey, if we end up having to fight one of these near peer militaries that are as good or almost as good as we are, we're going to have a lot harder time defeating them toe to toe, lacking, if they're just as well or nearly as well equipped as we are, we need to be able to outdo them. So, and because the guys were getting engaged from 7.62 by 5.4R weaponry during the GWAT in the form of the PKM machine gun or the SVD or PSL sniper rifle, that they were being overmatched from, they were being because the 5.56 has like an effective range of like a published effective range of 500 meters, and then beyond that they'll push 550. If you're using like Mark 262 and an 18-inch barrel, you could even push that out to like 700 meters. But for a bunch, like the main force, whether you want to call it GPF, like general purpose forces, or the CCF, close combat forces, which is the infantry, the cavalry / scouts, they are only trained for 300 meters. I don't know why they're not trained out to 500 meters. Most of the guys are trained out to 300 meters. It's not that they can't be effective out to 500 meters. It's just that there's no like work done to like develop that skill. So you got to imagine now a bunch of guys that like they're good out to 300, and there's like a 50-50 chance that they'll hit a point target. Now they're being engaged from past 400 meters, and they're like, this is not okay. We need to be able to reach out and touch these people. So that's where the overmatch thing comes from. And then like I said, the other guy, like the other thing was armor defeat capability, where we needed to be able to punch the body armor of foreign militaries. So that ammo technology, where that bimetal case allowing for the higher pressured ammo, which can therefore, it flies fast enough and hits hard enough to punch through the armor. That is technology right there that will be interesting to see retroactively applied to existing calibers that are already in circulation in mass. So 5.56, 7.62, even 300 blackout. We have weapons that use all of these calibers in our military. And rather than shit can all of them, because there's millions and millions of rounds of 7.62 and 5.56 in circulation, rather than throw that shit out, it's like, hey, why don't we just retrofit our older stuff to be able to hang out a little? We'll extend their utility and give them a little bit longer of a road into the future, rather than just like, oh, here's the end of the road for the M4. So yeah, the ammo technology, that's a big one. The XM5 itself, like I said, it's just a big battle rifle. It's like, all right, whatever. It's chambered for the new round. It delivers with a 13-inch barrel, so that's cool. what did we cover? Let's see. Good things come out of NGSW. The belt fed. Apparently the optic is like really cool in terms of capability wise. It's it's a 1:8 LPVO with a computer on top of it that shows you where and how to hold. And then you got the ammo itself. Notice I'm not saying the M5 or the MCX Spear itself is like a groundbreaking development, because like I said, it's just another large frame. It's just another battle rifle, really. It's like I compared it to the Scar. I was like, it's like Sig made a better Scar, essentially. Yeah, the Overmatch and the armor defeat capability were the big things. The ammo tech was another big thing.
So, as a reminder, Frank has an article about all of this over at taskernetwork.com, and we would encourage you all to go check that out. And at this point, let's hop into some of the potential negatives that you see.
So one of there's a couple of negative things that come to light. Since we were just talking about the ammo, 6851 is not a NATO cartridge. So for the U.S. to just wholesale adopt it as its main cartridge would mean that all of NATO, therefore, would either have to be ordering the same weapon from SIG, or they'd have to start asking all the weapon development companies that they've been buying weapons from for the last century that are still supplying them, like, hey, you guys got to start building us guns that can handle this overpressured 6851 ammo, because this is like the new thing. That's a big task. And a lot of companies didn't develop 6851 ammo because they didn't want to. It wasn't that they couldn't do it. It was that they know that the service life, which is to include barrel life and all the other parts in the gun that get replaced on a cycle, whether it's springs or other small parts and stuff like that, the service life of the weapons decreases because the ammo is so hot. Like the Army says, and the true believers within the Army, some of which I spoke to when I wrote my article, they say, yeah, by fiscal year 2023, there will be an aggressive overhaul where everyone that has an M4 will have an M5, and everyone that has an M249 will have an M250. I don't think we're going to see that, number one, because like I said, the ammo thing weighed against all the rest of NATO. It's just like you're telling Europe basically, you guys need to either buy new weapons or switch to this ammo or license some shit or whatever. Like, you guys need to spend money to keep up with us. The other thing too is, like I was saying before, the M5 is it's a battle rifle, and it's not the lightest battle rifle. The Scar is still lighter than it is at 8.4 pounds. It weighs just as much as a SR25 CC, the 16-inch barreled version that was discontinued. They're both 8.4 pounds. Now, that in and of itself isn't really an issue, but when you start to add all the other accoutrements to the gun, like there was one point in the article where I said like an unloaded M16A2 was 7.79 pounds. A loaded M16 magazine weighs a pound. So a loaded M16A2 was 8.79 pounds. Now imagine that weight plus, now look at the M16A4, right? So it's that weight plus the weight of the rail that's replaced the handguard, plus the weight of the optic, plus the weight of the laser, and all the other shit that you bolt onto a gun. So like back in the 2010s, let's say, like when I was new to this game, it wasn't uncommon to see an AR that, like, this was before key mod, before M-Lock, when like full length, like full quad rails was still the order of the day. It was not uncommon to see an AR that was, once you loaded it all up, was over 10 pounds. That was normal. That's why when guys these days are like, oh, my ounces equal pounds and equal pounds, blah, 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 blah. It's like, guys, come on, stop. We were tougher than this at one point. We regularly like nodded at a AR that weighed more than what you're complaining about right now. Chill the fuck out. You can handle it. That being said, a loaded up M5 is like 12 and a half to 13 fucking pounds. That's a fucking hoss. Trust me. I had a Mark 14 mod 0 clone-ish thing. Like it was like an M1A and a Sage chassis, and with a loophole Mark IV on top. That thing weighed like 14 fucking pounds. So I know what they're saying they're going to ask people to carry. I'm familiar with a similar load weight, and that fucking sucks. Number one. Number two, they're welcoming women into combat arms roles these days. So when you look at the fact that, okay, great, the 6851 round does offer an extended effective range and gives you the overmatch and the armor defeat capability that 5.56 and 7.62 lack, it does still recoil more than 5.56, and these are still people that are only trained to shoot out to 300 meters. So what is a heavier weapon with heavier recoiling ammo that they can carry less of because it's a bigger cartridge overall, and therefore it weighs more than your typical whatever A55A1, let's say, because that's the standard issue round. So they've got heavier ammo with less of it and a heavier recoil impulse, and they're still only like with the same training, the marksmanship training doctrine is going to have to evolve significantly if the Army really does want to go for broke and replace every M4 in the CCF with an M5. But that doesn't change the man-to-machine interface, where you're still handing Joe a heavier gun that is harder to control under rapid fire. And that's another thing someone wanted to argue with me about, was like, they were like, you think guys aren't trained to conserve ammo? And I'm like, no, I do think they're trained to conserve ammo, but I also know that Joe fucking will shoot the shit out of something that he thinks is trying to kill him and loses count of how many rounds he's firing. So there would have to be a very strict, like the whole indoctrination process of the military is getting screamed at for 3 months, being told not to do something or and do this instead. So they'd have to kind of apply the same approach to ammo conservation in a gunfight, where it's like you have to pretend you're shooting a bolt action rifle where you can't shoot as fast as you can pull the trigger, because you have to make your accuracy and marksmanship really count because you're carrying lesser rounds. The other thing too is this whole thing in Ukraine with Russia really kind of like had that Wizard of Oz effect of like showing you the man behind the curtain. Like this whole time, the DOD has been making Russia sound like the Wizard of Oz, the big holographic mean head with fangs and shit. And then the Ukrainians come in and they pull that like Toto, and they pull the curtain to the side, and there's this little frail old man pulling levers and shit, and it's like, what the fuck is going on here? That's what it is. So the comparison I'm making is when Russia went into Ukraine, the counterattack or the resistance that the Ukrainians were able to provide to mount and push back the Russians with their fancy body armor, their advanced weaponry, and whatever it was that they possessed in terms of materiel that had the DOD really scared. You had the Ukrainians were able to mount a respectable counterattack, and they still are to this day. And to the point that I think if the Ukraine stuff happened a couple or a few months earlier than it did, I think the NGSW program would have had a problem, because I think people would have started looking at it like, these are the fucking guys we're scared about. If these guys are only this good, I could tell you for a fact right now, China's got like numbers of bodies to throw at a problem, but China's tech ain't like their whole quality control is presumably lesser. So in light of that, what I think is going to happen is, and this is just my unqualified opinion, but I think that because, like I said earlier, 6851 just does 76251's job better. I think we're going to see the current 7.6251 gun. So that would be the HK417 that we use, the M110A1 CSAS and the M110E1 SDMR. We're going to see those get switched out for M5s with the fancy, with either the new optic on it, because now we're issuing fewer of them, or that 1:6 optic that the same HK417 is already using in terms of the SDMR. And the 7.62 machine guns, like the M240, they'll probably get rebarreled for 6.851. And then the M249s would get replaced by the M250. But then everything else would pretty much stay the same, is what I think is going to happen. Like, I think the M4A1 isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And not in that whole, oh, the Pogs will get to keep it, and the reserves and the National Guard and whatever, they'll still use the M6, like the Stoner AR weapons, whereas everybody on the front line is going to have the M5. Just the money weighed against the, like, yeah, capability is there, but the technology that we asked for a capability, the capability was delivered. The technology used to make that capability happen will more than likely get retroactively applied to our existing capability technology and plus it up, so to speak. M4A1 plus, M4A2, whatever you want to call it, because it is a heavier, everything, it's heavier and it's more recoil and it's less ammo, and it's also a lot of fucking money, like I just said. So there's all of that to be aware of. You have to weigh that against the reality of the situation, which is, who the fuck are we so worried about in the world that would really give us like, we have the technology now. If we need more of it, we could just have more of it made. But do we need more of it right now? I don't think so. If Ukrainians are fucking pushing Russians back with AK-74s and 5.45, I don't think there's any reason to shit can all of our 5.56 weaponry. If they didn't pick something or didn't go with something now, the likelihood of us seeing another upgrade or technological advancement initiative in terms of weapons and small arms and stuff like that, we probably wouldn't see something like that for decades. So right now, yes, they went through the whole process. Yes, they picked something. But like an IDIQ, you know what that means, right? It's like indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. They can order as many or as little as they want. And there's still going to be a whole year or two of testing before final integration happens. Or now that they've picked their finalist, now they're going to put their finalists through the ringer and make sure they could, they're satisfied. And I think during that process, they're going to come to the realization, like, look, this is good for our designated marksmen. This is good for our automatic riflemen. But to make the infantryman's job as a marksman that much more difficult, on top of all the other weight that they have to carry, probably ill-advised. And it's one thing to, like, 5.56 X by 45, that 5.56 NATO, where it versus, you know what? Yeah, we could like, keep the NATO round, keep that as the mainstay. That, logistically, that doesn't screw us up. The 7.62 on a case by case basis, or a phase out, phase in plan, can be replaced with the 6.851 stuff. And if you're limiting that to DMRs and machine guns, it's easier to get other people to buy into that. And like for me, the most exciting aspect is to see how that ammo tech is going to be retroactively applied to existing ammo, and see what it does for the capability of the weapons that do fire that ammo. I mean, maybe the barrel life and the parts life is shorter. Maybe they figure out a way to plus those components up in a way that's still retroactively compatible with what we have now. So you're just dropping in parts that have, equal amount of service life commensurate to the new ammo. But I don't think the M4A1's going anywhere. I think the army and the true believers in the army are like, oh no, everyone's getting this new M5 thing, and I'm like, I I don't see it. I really don't. Like we do not. We clearly, like Ukraine showed us, that we don't have a need right now. We have the technology, however. So if we need to tap that technology and access it and deploy it, we could do that. And in the meantime, there's always refinements going on. We might see a yet lighter version of the MCX Spear, the M5A1, if you will, M5A2. Like this happened with the M16, it happened with the M4, where upgrades happened. It wasn't just like the stock version that we got was what we stuck with. So it's interesting. Like the biggest positives is what doors were opened by this new technology that was developed for the NGSW program. The negatives are physical load weight and logistics slash expenses thereof, where it's like, does it weight against the reality of the world we live in? Did that cover everything?
I think it did, yeah. So if people want to find that article, where do they go?
They are looking to read the XM5 for Dummies article. They can go to taskernetwork.com and they click on the report tab. Or if they go to taskernetwork.com/report, they'll just be taken straight to the Tasker report, which is the name of our in-house blog. It focuses, or it's where all of our original content is posted up. Right now, I believe it's the most recent article. I was supposed to have something new out this week, but just time got away from me, and I'm working on a very big project. Otherwise, that you'll probably be excited to see once it's finished. But yeah, taskernetwork.com/report, and they can just find the article. It's called Layman Liaison, which is basically me saying I will liaise to the layman, or between the layman and those that actually know what's going on with this rifle and this program, and make sure, or take the big details and parse them down into something much easily digestible and able to understand, so that these people that are shit talking this whole fucking, oh, nice M14, nah, there's more to it than that. Educate yourself. I put this all together for you, and it's just as long as it is, because that no one should have any questions or misunderstandings about the NGSW program as it applies to the XM5 or the 6851 round once they've read that article. It's long, it might take them a while, but it's all there. The only reason, if they access that article and they don't read it all, they only have to blame themselves at that point.